card of this weekend's UFC Vegas 72 UFC Fight Night Song versus Simone, there's two unranked heavyweight contests. The first one is between Cuba, Missouri's own, the prototype, former RFA middleweight champ, Jake Collier, taking on the former Octagon heavyweight champ, Martin Badys Buday. And Martin Buday's start to his UFC career has been the most head-scratching thing I've ever seen. He has a unanimous decision win in his debut against Chris Barnett. Technical unanimous decision win because there were illegal strikes to the back of the head of Chris Barnett, and instead of a no contest or disqualification, we went to the judges' scorecard.
The old Biscuit Belcher.
Martin Buday was awarded the win. Then his last time out against Łukasz Drewski, he goes out there and he gets a decision win. Now, Matt, over on MMA decisions, 1 scored at 29-28 Buday, 11 scored at 29-28 Drewski, 1 scored at 30-29 Drewski, but Buday ends up getting the win. So all of a sudden, Buday goes from fighting Drewski, who looked terrible his last time out against Carl Williams, to now Buday fights Jake Collier. And I had high hopes for Buday coming into the UFC. We compared him to, and I still think the comparison's valid, a herky-jerky Ben Rothwell. He walks forward, he puts his body weight on his opponents, he'll clinch you to drag your head down to try and tire you out. He's one of the bigger heavyweights you're going to find. You can see that from the graphic, 266. He has decent volume numbers on the outside, but I saw him, before he came into Dana White's Contender Series against Camille Minda, where he almost got finished in the first round. He looked super tired, and then in the second round lands one jab from distance that didn't look like it landed, and Minda's out on his feet and drops, and that's it. So for Buday, he looked good on Dana White's Contender Series. He looked all right against Chris Barnett. And then his last time out against Drewski looked very bad. Whereas Jake Collier's had fights where I thought he won, but he lost against Carlos Felipe. I thought he won, but he lost against Andrei Arlovski. And his last time against Chris Barnett, you talk about blowing loads. He blew that load.
I haven't talked about blowing loads one time, but you can't avoid bringing it up.
And then in the second round, Jake Collier was out of gas, and Barnett took over.
And that's what I don't like about Collier. Even though you can disagree with the decision in the Arlovski fight or the Felipe fight, but the problem with Collier is when he initially went up to heavyweight, what I liked was he was a fast heavyweight, right? Physically, he looked like a heavyweight, but he still kind of fought like the middleweight version of himself. He had good volume, he had good footwork, he moved well for a heavyweight, but I feel like he has somewhat slowed down a little bit in these previous couple of fights.
I disagree. I thought the Volante version, the Felipe version, the Arlovski version, all three versions of Jake Collier in those fights, where I thought that he won all three of those fights, he looked quick and the volume was good and the leg kicks were really good.
Arlovski's 40-some years old and well past his prime. I just think for Collier, it's one thing to look fast against those guys who, like Felipe's not especially fast either. I just think for Collier, the thing that was so special about him now that he is starting to even face upper levels of competition isn't as important as it once was. So I will be curious to see if Collier has enough power to hurt Buday, because you're right. Buday's a guy who really makes you feel his physicality, and it's not a perfect comp because Tyson Fury's so good, but that's what I always talk about with Fury, right? He makes guys feel, and he's really wearing on them with his shoulders. That's something Buday does do very well, and I think it will help him avoid some of those strikes of a guy like Jake Collier. So we'll be curious to see if Collier has enough kind of one-shot power to get the respect of Buday, because if he is able to do that, I could see a world where Collier is able to mix in the takedown even, just feint it, use the clinch, and be that well-rounded mixed martial artist that he is. I just worry that if he is on the back foot and he's not really able to gain the confidence or the respect of Buday at any point throughout the fight, Buday won't have any reason to not just continue to walk forward and kind of wear on Collier as this fight continues.
Yeah, it really is a strange one, and especially when you look at Jake Collier, his UFC record, not the shiniest. He had that great fight against Marcel Fortuna, where again, it was a lot of volume, it was a lot of the leg kicks, but by the numbers, if you do look at it for a guy like Jake Collier at heavyweight, 16 leg kicks against Volante, 24 against Felipe, 20 against Fortuna. It's numbers like Chase Sherman, who is able to go out there and submit, but it's numbers that kind of put that money in the bank to really pay off as these fights go on. And even for a guy like Buday against Lorenzo Hood, Buday was a minus 400 favorite in that fight, withstood some adversity before he ended up getting the finish, and now that 2-0 in the UFC, it's great, but it's almost like sitting in your car listening to We Will Rock You on cassette. If you're really good at drumming on your steering wheel, nobody cares. It's that same type of 2-0.
Kevin Bacon it.
It's great, but you're not really getting anywhere with it. So when you look at the odds in the matchup, Buday is a slight favorite, like ever so slightly. They're almost at par. We have a look at the Topology votes. Martin Buday is 11-1. And Jake Collier's 13-8. I'm going to assume the fans have Buday in the fight.
Probably.
I'm going to say over under 60 Buday.
Where is your mind?
69%.
I'm going to say over.
I'm going to say over. It is over. 564 total votes, 87% Buday, 48% by decision, 44% by knockout. The 13% that have Collier, 68% by decision. Jake Collier throws really good volume, and if he gets Buday hurt, maybe just take your time, pick him apart like a Jeff Neal type. But when I look at it, I do have a hard time. The odds suggest a close fight. I have a hard time picking this fight.
It is a close fight because it's going to come down to the overall control and the dirty boxing of Buday versus how much work Collier can get done on some of those in-betweens. For that reason, I think Collier is a smart pick, even though I am going to go with Buday because I think this fight is so close. I just think the overall physicality will start to wear on Collier as this fight goes on. But again, if he can use the leg kick, evade some of those clinches and some of the dirty boxing of Buday, Collier has a great opportunity to win this fight. I just don't think he's going to be able to use the grappling as much. And for that reason, it's going to make him much more of a striker.
Collier's one of those guys in clinch situations where he automatically digs one underhook, gets the other lead hand behind the neck, tries to snap it, get out of the bad position. And if he can't snap it away, he tries to land really sneaky uppercuts when he is in those clinch positions. He lands better volume numbers than Martin Buday, but for the same reasons. All of a sudden, control time, it scores with judges. And in a heavyweight fight where I don't necessarily see a finish, I guess I'm going with Badys Martin Buday in this fight. Buday is one of those guys that closes range with a jab, doesn't check leg kicks that Jake Collier throws, which is a little scary. When he closes the distance, he really tries to knock it down and then go for his takedown and really wear on his opponent. So for those reasons, I'm going to go with Slovakia's own Martin Buday. One of a few Slovaks in the UFC, like Ludwig Klein, who's got a big fight coming up against Jim Miller. So that one's interesting. But both of us in the matchup going with Buday. If you have Jake Collier, you let us know down below in the comment section. Some big fights, including Waldo Cortes-Acosta, Marcos Rogerio de Lima. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say.
Let's get into it.